This is the honey badger. Watch it run in slow motion. It's pretty badass. Look, it runs all over the place. Whoa, watch out, says that bird. The honey badger has been referred to by the Guinness Book of World Records as the most fearless animal in all of the animal kingdom. It really doesn't give a shit.
Hey, how's it guys? Today's video is a little bit different. It should be more of a fireside chat than anything else. But I just want to share with you some of the things that I've noticed from new shooters coming to the shooting range, especially buying their first PCP rifles. So the video today is around how do I buy my first PCP rifle, how do I set up my first PCP rifle, and how do I take my first shots. So let's look at the first one of those scenarios. How do I buy my first PCP? So when a customer tells me that they want to buy a PCP, the first thing that I ask them is, what do you need it for? What is your intended use? And if they tell me that they need it for some backyard plinking, they need it to shoot some doves and some Indian miners, or they live in a plot, my answer to them is, don't get a PCP, you don't need it. Get yourself a Gammo CFX with a nice Gammo 6x24x50 scope, and you'll have more than sufficient fun with that scenario as opposed to buying a PCP. You definitely don't need that. So what are the two other uses that you do need a PCP for? Well, the first one is obviously hunting, and we'll get into that detail. And the second one is precision shooting. So if I'm going to be doing target shooting, 25-meter bench rest, 50-meter bench rest, 100-meter bench rest, whatever those scenarios might be for, those are two ideal conditions to buy a PCP rifle. So let's look at hunting first. Now in South Africa, the biggest caliber that you get available or that you can legally own is a .22. Now, I know that your mates have told you that they've shot a kudu with their PCP Air Rifle at 150 meters. That's a bullshit story. And even if it was true, they probably got a lucky shot through an eye at 25 meters. But in no way, shape, or form is a .22 caliber air rifle a hunting tool for big antelope or anything in that class. If you want to shoot some monkeys, you want to shoot some dassies, you want to shoot some jackal or some springhasse, yes, you can definitely use it for those purposes. But this is not a tool that you're going to be using to hunt antelope in South Africa. It's not a humane tool for that purpose, so I highly wouldn't recommend that, even if you shoot slugs at 1,000 feet per second. So which brings us to precision shooting. So on the precision shooting side, that makes a lot of sense because you want consistency with your shots. You want to build up muscle memory so that every single time you squeeze that trigger, you get the same experience through a regulated barrel on a piece of paper. So those are the two scenarios that we can look at. So what is the second question that I ask people that want to buy a PCP rifle? And that is, what is your budget? Now, I know that there's a lot of talk about budget PCP rifles. It's a fallacy. A PCP rifle and all the accessories that you need to make it work is not a cheap exercise, and I'll explain that in more detail in just a second. So if someone tells me that their budget is 5,000 Rand or 10,000 Rand, the first thing that I tell them is you need to add at least 25% to that because there's some things that you haven't considered that you definitely need to consider when making this purchase. My dad always told me that goedkoop koop is duur koop. So buying cheap is buying expensive. And I found that over and over again in my personal experience when buying my first set of PCPs. I literally went from budget entry-level PCP to a little bit more expensive one to a little bit more expensive one until I finally went and bought myself a FX Crown and traded that in on a Daystate Red Wolf and finally settled on an FX Impact. So I've gone through the journey personally, and I can tell you that it is an expensive journey if you don't make good decisions early on. So let's just have a look at what some of those costs might be. So the first thing is we obviously need the rifle, and we're going to go into some detail around what are the things that you should look for when buying a PCP air rifle. But the second thing that we need to take into consideration is we need to keep the cylinder, whether that's a bottle or a tube, filled with air. Otherwise, we can't get regulated shots. And if we can't get regulated shots, none of those two scenarios, whether it's hunting or precision shooting, will take effect. Now, what are my options when filling my cylinder? Well, there's really three options. The first one is a hand pump, and a hand pump is a shit idea. Like, honestly, unless you're a 12-year-old that's got like I don't know, you inherited some PCP from a toppy that has like a 200 bar cylinder and you don't mind pumping for the next 30 minutes, I guess that can work for you. But a pump, firstly, it's guaranteed to break. I mean, if that thing lasts 3 months, you're very, very lucky. And secondly, it's bloody hard work. So a pump for me is a terrible idea. The second thing is a cylinder, and this is very similar to a diving cylinder. The biggest difference is typical diving cylinders is about 232 bar, where the cylinders that we need for PCP air rifles, especially the new ones, is sort of 300 bar cylinders. Now, if you look at a cylinder, there's really two choices. You get some carbon fiber cylinders and you get some steel cylinders, and obviously those come in different sizes. Now, in South Africa, once again, unfortunately, 99.95% of diving operations will not fill your carbon cylinder. Unless it's a dragger cylinder with its yellow markings or yellow and gray markings, they won't fill that cylinder. So carbon cylinders are amazing. They like ridiculously light. Most of them will outlast you, 25, 30 years. But South African sort of diving centers do not fill those carbon cylinders. I think it's the first thing. And even secondly, the regulations on filling cylinders are also tightening up. So, that's something to take into consideration. So those are my cylinders. Steel cylinders, obviously, we're getting a variety, 4.5 or 6 liters, 6 liters, 10 liters. Buy the biggest cylinder that you can afford and that your back will carry. The next thing that you need is you need a filling station on top of that cylinder. So let's say my 6 liter cylinder is 5,000 Rand. I need a filling station. So that's about another 1,200 Rand. The filling station allows us to take the air from the cylinder or diving cylinder and fill our tubes or our bottles with that specific regulated air. So you do need that as well. And obviously, in my recommendation, if you live close to an area that has a scuba facility that can fill cylinders, your only consideration should be a cylinder with a filling station. The third option that you get is you can get yourself a mini compressor. Now, once again, those mini compressors have specific administrative needs. You need to make sure that you keep them cool. You need to make sure that that you don't overrun them. There's a variety of things that you need to consider when buying that little compressor. But if you're living on a farm, away from anywhere that can fill a cylinder, or if you're going into the farm and you're not close to anyone that can assist you with that process, that has to be your only option, because eventually you're going to run out of air, especially if you've got like a small cylinder, and you don't want to get stuck in a scenario where you really want to go and hunt, or you really want to sit underneath a tree and shoot some cans, and you can't do it because you don't have air. So that's quite an important thing to consider as well. So, you know, just before we start, we've just spoken about the rifle. We've spoken about the fact that we actually need to keep that cylinder, the tube or the bottle on the rifle filled. The next thing that we need to consider is you need to have a decent scope on that rifle. I see so many people that come into the shop and they say, look, I've got 10,000 Rand for a rifle. And I say, okay, cool. I'm sure we can make something work within that space. And then they'll tell me that, no, I'll take like 1,500 Rand scope. Now, that is the worst decision that you can make. You cannot shoot what you cannot see. So let's look at the two recommendations. If you're going to be using a scope for hunting, your 4x16 scope will do. I mean, your parallax on that is pretty accurate and won't give you a lot of hassle, but you still need a decent scope. So in my opinion, there's really two scopes that I recommend when it comes to PCP air rifles. The first one has to be Hawk. I mean, I absolutely love my Hawk range, but the second one is Vector Optics. So, you know, get yourself a 4x16 if you're going to hunt, or if you're going to be doing precision shooting, you have to get a 6x24. I mean, I will even go as far as saying get yourself a Vector Optic Sentinel that's, you know, 5x40 if you're going to be doing precision shooting. So the more you can see, the better you can see, the more accurate you're going to be. Most of these scopes also don't come with scope rings. So you need to go and get yourself a set of scope rings that will still clear the magazine within that rifle, but allow you to have very, very good field of view. So now we've talked about the fact that before we even begin with the rifle, we need a cylinder, we need a filling station, we need a scope, we need some scope rings. So as you can see, you know, this is not going to be a cheap exercise. So once again, if you're going to make this commitment, make sure that you get your rifle right the first time. Otherwise, you're going to buy a cheap make rifle. And these are very popular brands, by the way. I'm not here to slam brands, but you know, people think that these are good purchases to make, only to find out that they can't sell that rifle once they have to upgrade. Because let's just face it, if you make a mistake in the beginning and you start shooting, especially precision shooting, you're going to have to upgrade, and you'll realize that you can't sell that rifle for a third of the price that you paid for it. So you have to make good decisions when it comes to the rifle itself. So if this was 2 or 3 years ago, the first conversation we would have had is, do I need a regulated or an unregulated rifle? And the fact of the matter is, if you're going to buy a brand new PCP rifle today, there should be zero reason for you to buy an unregulated PCP rifle. Zero reason. The only reason why you would still buy an unregulated rifle is if you want to go and do HFT shooting and you need a sub 12 pound or foot-pound rifle, and you can get yourself a nice Air Arms S410 or a CZ200. Those are good reasons. And those should be the only reasons why you buy an unregulated rifle. So that's the first thing. We need a rifle that is regulated. The second thing that we need is we need that rifle, that regulator to be adjustable. Now you'll see, I think this is a good time to enter this video. Many people come to the range with their tin of pellets, and they fell for the marketing stunt where someone told them this rifle shoots pellets at 1,200 feet per second. And they're like lank excited because holy shit, I can shoot slugs for that matter. And they come to the air rifle range and they're struggling with consistency. Man, it's just not working. The accuracy is all over the place. So the first thing I do is I bring out the crony and I say, okay, cool. Let's just see what the best pellet for this rifle will be. And as you can see here, I've taken a rifle that I've set up specifically for target shooting, and I want to shoot 18.13 grain pellets consistently at 850 feet per second. That is what this specific rifle likes. That is what makes this specific rifle super accurate. So that's what I want to shoot when I shoot this specific rifle. Anything lighter than 18 grain pellets, the wind will affect obviously a little bit more. So, 18 grain is really what I love shooting. So I bring out the crony and we take that first shot, and the guy is shooting 30 grain slugs at 600 feet per second. And you're like, my guy, like, what are you thinking? Like, take the slugs, do it in a dustbin, and let's start over. So the first thing that we then have to do is go back to 18.13 grain pellets. We put those through the crony, and the guy's sort of running 800, 780 feet per second. Now you might get away with that if you're shooting 25-meter targets, but it's definitely not ideal. Once again, an 18.13 grain pellet, you want to shoot between 850 and 875. That is the sweet spot. You can shoot that at 25 or 50 meters all day long. That's what you want to be doing. But as you can see in this video that I've posted here, we started with 14 grain pellets and it shot that over 900 feet per second. We then went to a 15 grain pellet that had shot at 860, 70 feet per second. We then went to an 18 grain pellet that had shot at 845, 850. We then went to a 21 grain pellet that had shot at, I can't remember, just below 800. And then we went to a 25 grain pellet that had shot at about 700 something-ish feet per second. So as you can see there, it's not about the 1,000+ feet per second that the marketing team tells you about that rifle. It's about which pellet and which weight it can shoot that FPS consistently. So that's what's quite important. So you have to crony your rifle so that you can make sure that whatever pellet you're going to decide on, your rifle can actually shoot. So that's why I said that one of the things that's important for me is you need an adjustable regulator. So on these Avengex rifles, which I absolutely love, by the way, they've got adjustable regulators. So at 100 bar on the regulator, I can shoot 18 grain pellets at 880 feet per second all day long. So, and because the regulator is sitting at 100 bar, I get 150 plus shots on a single fill. But if I wanted to go and shoot 25 grain pellets, which is a minimum that you're going to need if you're actually going to hunt monkeys and jackal, for that matter, either the 25 grain redesigned pellets or some slugs in that space, your regulator needs to be, or your rifle needs to be able to shoot those at least 980 feet per second. And if you don't have an adjustable regulator that allows you to shoot at that speed, well, you're stuck. You can't hunt with that thing. I mean, you can obviously try, but it's not what it was designed to do. So once again, if I look at this rifle, I can set the regulator up at 140 bar. I can turn my hammer spring in, sort of 3/4, and I'm shooting 25 grain pellets or slugs at 980 feet per second. So I want an adjustable regulator in that process as well. Then we get to the trigger section. Now, if I'm going to use my rifle for hunting, I want that trigger to be set between 2 to 2.5 pounds. And the reason for that is, if I'm walking or I'm tracking a specific dussie or a hussy or whatever it is that I'm busy tracking, and I do it over a rock, I don't want that shot to just break. So I want that trigger at about 2.5 pounds. But when I'm at the shooting range, I want that trigger at 1 pound or less. I mean, I want as little disturbance as possible when I squeeze that trigger in order to ultimately break that shot. So an adjustable trigger for me, again, is quite an essential part of making this specific decision. So if we can just summarize there, we're looking at a regulated rifle so that we can get more shots on a single fill and it is consistent. We're looking at an adjustable regulator so that we can shoot different grains of either pellets or eventually slugs. And we want an adjustable trigger that we can either use for hunting or we can use for precision shooting. Okay, and those are some of the key things that you need to consider when you're looking at buying your first PCP rifle. I think there's some other things that we need to take into consideration. So that is setting up my rifle before I take my first shots. So the first thing in setting up your rifle is you have to clean the barrel. I have so many people at the range that tell me, no, I've just bought it. So, it's clean. Cock, it's not clean. That's the dirtiest it will ever be. So you have to go and take a bore snake, pull it through there a few times and really clean that barrel. It does affect your accuracy and it will mess you around all day long. So you have to take that into consideration. Depending on what you want to do with that PCP as well, you might need a moderator. So just keep in mind that that's probably going to cost you 1,500 Rand as well, depending on where you shoot and what the restrictions might be in that specific scenario. Okay, cool. So we've cleaned the barrel of the rifle. Now we need to mount our scope. So in mounting the scope, the first thing that you need to do is you're going to go and mount your scope rings. But don't get attached to where you mount them. So just take your finger and the Allen key and just, like not even finger tight. We're talking about just let it grip on the Picatinny or the dovetail. Just let it grip. Now the second thing we're going to do is put our scope on top of those rings, and we're going to put the top of the rings back and just have 2 screws on each side. The reason for that is so many people go and put that scope up. We get their eye relief right, and as soon as you pick the scope up, the scope falls out or over or whatever the case may be. And trust me, your heart will fail for a few seconds when that happens to you the first time, or any time for that matter, if I think about it. So you want to make sure that you get your eye relief right. That's a whole different video. You want to make sure the rifle is level and all of those kinds of things. So eventually you're going to get that right. We're going to mount our scope, and now we're going to take our first shot. Now I've done a little video. I'll try and tag it somewhere here. I don't quite know how that process works yet, but I'll figure it out in the post-production on how to set up your scope or how to zero your scope in 2 shots only. So many people, once again at the range, I see them take that first shot and then it's 5 clicks up, 3 clicks right, and you take the next shot and then 3 clicks down to, like, it's a mess. It takes them 20 plus pellets to set that scope up, when I guarantee you can do it in 2 shots. So please go and watch this video. It's a little animation that I made just to show you how easy it is to actually go and set up your scope. And that is really the process that you're going to follow. I think the last thing that I'll mention on this is how many times should I clean my barrel? And there's 2 schools of thought here. The one is clean your barrel after every 500 shots. I personally don't have time for that. I shoot 1 pellet consistently, and that's either the Cometa JSB 18.13 grain, or it's the JSB 18.13 grain. Essentially the same thing, just different batches and different dies. So I don't mix my pellets, and for that reason, you know, once I've cleaned it once, I like that sort of lead liner that it leaves, and I don't clean it again. The other school of thought is obviously, you know, if you're going to be shooting different pellets, so I'm going to swap from JSB to H&Ns, those are different kinds of lead. So, you know, if you're going to swap between pellets, you definitely have to go and clean your barrel. And also note that it's going to take you at least probably 50 shots to line that barrel of yours up again. So that is quite important to keep into consideration. Once you've cleaned your barrel, it takes a few shots for that barrel and that pellet to settle. So just keep that in mind as well. But if you're going to be swapping pellets, you definitely have to clean your barrel. And the last thing is, please stay away from copper pellets. It does mess up your barrel. It will line those grooves and that smooth twist with quite a bit of copper. So I would definitely not recommend that. Okay guys, please share with me some of the other things that you've learned. These are just some of the things off the cuff that I can recommend at the moment when you're looking at buying, setting up and shooting your first PCP air rifle. Cool, I'll see you on the next video.